Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people think they can do what they want, when they want, and there's no consequences. And in this episode, we've got parents letting their kids run wild in stores, Karen's throwing tantrums on trains, OP's entitled coworker loses his house, and one OP divorces her husband over something that seems so little it's ridiculous, guys. I hope you enjoy the stories. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So my night job is at a specialty pet food store that offers baked treats and goodies for your pets. And we also offer grooming and self-wash grooming stations where you can come in and wash your pet. The day this happened, a couple came in with their son, who was about 9 years old, to wash their dog. The couple went in with the dog, and they left their son to wander around the store. As I'm by myself, I didn't notice he was unsupervised until they had gone in and started washing their dog. I spent 15 minutes finishing my baking, taking care of customers, and following this kid around to clean up after him. The kid was grabbing random toys and playing with them, and then setting them down wherever he wanted. He was bouncing all the tennis balls and grabbing leashes off the shelf and pretending they were lassos, whipping things off the shelves. He was also bothering my customers, asking them random questions as they tried to shop. After I asked him 3 times to stop messing with things and other people, he went to our baked goods table, where I laid out the freshly baked dog treats. This is when I knock on the self-wash door and I ask the parents to please bring their son into the wash with them, or let him sit in the car while they finish. They told me they were almost done and that their son was never a problem. I then explained that he was disturbing other customers and playing with random items and I was having to clean up after him. And this is when the woman looked me right in the eyes and she said, "Yeah, that's your job, so go do it." I told her my job was to run the store, not babysit customers' kids. She then rolls her eyes at me and said they were almost done. I come back to the sales floor and this kid had crumbled 3 cakes and a whole bunch of treats, as well as snapped a bunch of bully sticks and other dried treats in half. The kid smiles and bounces off and I start to gather and ring up the items. The parents come out of the self-wash station and I add to the transaction, telling them their total was $149.76. Upon hearing that, their mouths drop, and the guy says, $150 to wash my effing dog? Are you mental? To which I respond, no sir, the self-wash itself is $16. The rest is to cover what your son destroyed in my store. The mom says her son didn't destroy anything, and this is when I gesture to the pile of broken cakes and treats on the table, and all the things that were knocked off the shelves that I left for them to see. I then say, actually ma'am, he did. He broke all of this after I asked you to please supervise him. He also did all of that, gesturing to the mess he made. The woman then starts yelling, saying I must have broken them, because I didn't like having her son in the store. Because yes, I love baking a bunch of stuff just to destroy it. She's got me there. Now, I had a feeling that this was going to be the reaction, so I had the video from our cameras ready to show her. I show Karen and say, this isn't your son walking to our table and smashing those cakes and treats? This also isn't your son going to the treats table and snapping them all in half? She didn't say anything for a second, and then that's when she told me that she shouldn't have to pay for them. And I told her that her child broke them after I asked her to watch him or let him sit in the car, so it was her responsibility to cover our losses. She then asked to speak to the manager, and she was very disappointed when I pointed to my name tag that said manager under my name. I tell her, you are speaking to the manager, ma'am. Is there anything else I can help you with today? If not, your total is $149.76. The woman glared at me, but she put her card in and paid. Upon leaving, she screamed she was never coming back here, and it looked like they were screaming at the kid the whole way to the car. Yeah, that's when OP should have said, you promise to never come back? But yeah, bringing your kid into a store and letting them terrorize customers and destroying things, expecting employees to watch them, this is the a-hole tax Karen had to pay that day. And with that aside, like, the kid is also 9 years old. Should he really be left alone to randomly wander stores? I don't know if I watch too much true crime stuff or what, but if my kids were with me in public, I would never let them out of my sight. Like, could you imagine the chaos that would have ensued if the parents came out and they realized that little Timmy was nowhere to be found? What a nightmare that would be. Between 2011 and 2014, I worked as an onboard host on London-bound trains in the UK. An onboard host is the person who serves drinks and food on trains. I did this from a trolley that I wheeled back and forth down the train. It's like working a retail job, only you're dragging your shop behind you and there's no manager or security guard. It's just you, the conductor who has nothing to do with you, the driver, and possibly 900 passengers. So as you can imagine, in the years I worked there, I saw some weird and wonderful things. I saw a lot of Karens from all walks of life, but here's one that really sticks out though. It's midsummer and it's hot as hell, and everything has gone wrong today. It's a Sunday, and due to a heat wave, several trains have broken down so far in the last few hours, and every train has been packed with people. For the most part, everyone has been in a decent mood, except for Karen. It's my last train of the day, and every seat is full, even first class. I've made my target for the day, and I'm looking forward to going home. I passed through the first 3 carriages, and as I'm about to enter the 4th, I can hear someone shouting in there. It's the quiet carriage, so yeah, you're not supposed to be loud enough that I can hear you through the doors. So I get there, and there's an older woman yelling at someone across the aisle in there. Now, it's not my responsibility to deal with this stuff, but I have to walk through, whether I like it or not, so off I go. I walk up to them and say, "Good afternoon, would anyone like a drink or snack?" Thinking that would break up the chaos. And that's when the Karen screams at me and says, "You, I demand you throw him off the train this instant." She then points to the man, who seems to be doing his best to ignore her. I ask, "May I ask what's wrong?" Karen says, "He's drinking beer. That's illegal." And here's the thing. In a way, she is right. At the time, the train bylaw stated that you can't drink alcohol you hadn't purchased on the train. Kinda like not being able to bring your own beer into a bar. However, it wasn't something that anyone really cared about, as long as you're not drunk and bothering other people. Enjoy your drink. I tell Karen, "I'm afraid that's not true, ma'am." Karen says, "It is. It's illegal to drink on trains." Me, pointing to the 14+ beers and little bottles of spirit I have for sale, say, "I'm afraid that's not true. Alcohol is allowed, as long as you're responsible about it." Karen starts stuttering, and I ask, "Are you alright, sir?" The man tells me I just opened my beer and she got angry. I worked all day and I just want a drink. And I want to note, the poor man looks like he's had a rough day. Karen says, "I can smell it and it's offensive. I demand you remove that horrid stuff immediately." I tell Karen, "Ma'am, I can't take his drink. That would be stealing." She then says, "Then kick him off. Alcoholics are disgusting. Do you support alcoholics?" She then wags her finger at me saying, "You shouldn't be selling that stuff. You are no better than a drug dealer. This man has a problem if he needs to drink on the train." I just tell her, "The only thing I can do is suggest you change seats." Now, this isn't what Karen wanted to hear. She then says, "This was the only seat left. You get me the person in charge here." I tell her, "My manager's in London. I can give you a customer service number if you want, but either way, this man is well within his rights to drink his beer." Karen then loses it and says, "How dare you? Give me your name so I can have you fired." It's at this point the conductor comes over and he says, "What's going on here?" I jump a little as I don't hear the conductor come in, but I'm so happy to see him. I work for a contractor, not the train company, so he's not my boss or even a coworker, really. Karen, however, seems to think differently, and a wicked smile appears on her face. Karen says to the conductor, "This man is a drunk. He's an alcoholic and he's hurting me. She is helping." It's at this point the passengers around her, who have been desperately trying to look like they can't hear, start shuffling and grumbling. I have no idea how she was going to prove assault with 70 witnesses and cameras on the train. The conductor then looks at the man and says, "Sir, what's going on?" The man tells him, "I was just sitting here and this lunatic starts yelling at me over nothing." This is when Karen comes in and says, "Liar." The conductor sighs and says, "Can I see your tickets, please?" The man hands over his ticket. All good. Karen then gives hers over after a big performance of getting it out of her bag. And this is when the conductor's face lights up. He tells me, "OP, you should move on. I'll handle it from here." I tell him, sure. So I trundle off with my trolley and make sure I'm out of the way for the next stop. As the doors open, I can hear a familiar voice yelling and cursing. I peek out to see Karen being hustled off the train. I find out she's on the wrong train, going in the wrong direction. The woman's yelling how it's our fault and we should make the train turn around and take her where she needs to go. Every threat in Karen's arsenal is coming out of her mouth at top volume, but the conductor just blows his whistle and shuts the doors in her face. I never saw that woman again, but I like to think that she's still there, screaming at the sky that the train should do what she wants because she said so. There were so many tales of entitled idiots I've had to deal with, but this is by far my favorite. I freaking love this post, guys, and the cherry on top is she was on the wrong train. I mean, I guess in a way it was a good thing she caused the scene because who knows how long she would have sat on the wrong train for. I also love that she was screaming for the train to turn around. You gotta love entitled mentality, right? I'm on the wrong train, so this one needs to turn around. So this is a long one, and it took over a decade in reality. About 20 years ago, I got a new job. I was excited, and one of my first tasks was to fix someone else's mess up as quickly and as quietly as possible. I seem to have made a career out of that. My new employer, who we'll call XYZ, had made various kinds of industrial machines for different parts of a particular industry, and there is one sitting on the shop floor that's almost finished, but it has a subsystem that doesn't work. They've done plenty of machines with that feature before, but this one's different because the sales rep has managed to get the customer to pay tens of thousands of dollars extra for the option of X part having its own independent drive system, instead of a mechanical one coupled to the rest of the machine. Now, there's no real point in doing that, but the same is true for metallic paint on your car. If the customer wants it, let them pay for it. Anyways, all you need to know is XYZ have actually never built one of these things with a separate drive before. So the guys who added it to the options list, who we'll call Clown and Clown's boss Senior Clown, have spent the last 6 months messing around trying to build one. There is now 2 weeks left before delivery, and they've blown through the budget long ago. So I'm called into my new boss's office along with the 2 clowns. And I'm told the single most important thing this week and next week is to make it work. My boss tells me we hired you knowing you're an expert in Y technology, which is true. So that should be fine. You need to do it. I tell my boss, sure, I'll make it top priority and get right on it. Senior Clown assures me that it's basically good to go. It just needs some fine tuning. So me, being the expert, look at the machine, and there is zero possibility that what they've done can ever be made to work. Like literally, nothing is salvageable. I can't really go into the technicalities without giving clues to the industry and the identities of the guilty. But for non-technical analogy, just imagine that someone's task is making an omelet, and they decide to do it by mixing breakfast cereal with beer and then setting it on fire. For some reason that doesn't work, so they get a different cereal and more expensive beer, and they set fire to that. Rinse and repeat for 6 months while assuring the higher-ups and the end customer that it's going really well. So I report this as tactfully as possible to the new boss, causing Senior Clown to hate me with the fire of 1,000 suns. What Senior Clown thought they were going to do to meet the delivery date without having someone else build a working one, I never found out. So my new boss says, fix it. The machine has to ship on this day at the latest. Buy whatever you need, just make it work. So I did. I completely re-engineered the mechanical and electrical system and programmed the extra control gear from scratch in 2 weeks. The thing was done and it worked okay, and off it goes to the customer on the due date. After that, the separate drive was taken off the options list because Senior Clown wasn't going to use my system, even though it was a case of ordering duplicate parts and following the build manual I'd written as I went. Fast forward 3 years, and XYZ was taken over by someone else, and it was merged into another firm. Well, new management decided that a couple of market segments aren't things they want to be doing anymore, including this type of machine, and they get out of the business. All of this is above board, and the customers are kept informed. It all takes a year or so. In the rearrangement, Clown gets a new job somewhere else, and Senior Clown takes a cushy early retirement deal. Another thing is, XYZ also used to service these machines at customer sites, something we needed to do every 6 months or so. So they sold the rights to do this to one of the sales reps who's also taking early retirement. The ex-sales rep goes to start his own company, and yes, the same one who originally sold this machine. He gets all the documentation, parts at wholesale rate or free, and manpower to help for the first 12 months or so. I understand he also took on Senior Clown as a consultant because he'd been in charge of building these things all those years, but that was a deal between them. So life moves on another couple of years, and I also leave XYZ. I'm on good terms, so I work 3 months' notice to hand over properly. And for a few months afterwards, I get the occasional email from my ex-colleagues wanting to pick my brain. After that, it's purely social stuff for big number birthdays or retirements or major drinking sessions or whatever. Something else I should also mention is for my entire time at XYZ, I had 2 mobile phones. One was a work phone, paid for by XYZ, that was only used for business, and one was my own personal one, which I kept the same number before, during, and after, that never ever got used for business. HR had my private one listed in my file for emergencies or whatever, but that was it. So with that said, about 5 years after I left XYZ, I get a phone call at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The guy on the other end knows my name, and while very insistent, he's also polite, so I let it play out. Come to find out that this guy's the plant manager for the customer who bought that particular machine over a dozen years ago, and the guy has a big problem. These machines have to run several hours every day, unless they're being serviced, and it isn't working today because something has gone wrong or worn out in the system I engineered. The system's fundamental to the machine, so it isn't running. The staff are standing around, product can't be made, and they're losing a couple of $1,000s an hour. If it isn't running tomorrow, they'll be at risk of losing major contracts. Hearing that, I say, "Oh, why are you telling me, and how did you get this number?" The plant manager goes on to say if they can't diagnose and fix it over the phone, he needs me on a plane to him right now. The guy tells me there's hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake. I reply, again, why are you telling me, and how did you get this number? The plant manager says, I know you designed the system, and this is the number the ex-sales rep gave me for tech support when you took over from XYZ. So I explain that I don't work for ex-sales rep. I also don't work for XYZ anymore. I haven't been involved in that industry at all for half a decade. I tell him that this is my private number, and it's my day off from the unrelated job I have now, so I don't owe anyone anything. I talk to him some more, and it turns out that ex-sales rep has been charging them a hefty annual fee for the right to call my number if they have a problem. He told them guaranteed service, 24 hours a day, 52 weeks a year. The plant manager even has my private address on the service agreement he signed. And while the ex-rep has been pocketing the money all these years, probably the best part of a decade, the original system has continued to soldier on with basically no maintenance until something went kaput today. So with that said, the plant manager is simultaneously horrified and bust a blood vessel angry and hideously embarrassed at being taken advantage of by the sales rep. Going from memory, I tell him how to check the various standard things that might have gone wrong, and what I can remember of the error codes, but I don't have the documentation, the program, the service tools. Oh, and this is also 100% not my problem. The guy takes this with surprisingly good grace. He apologizes and hangs up. The first thing Monday morning, I ring up XYZ. I've kept in touch enough to know that new boss has since been promoted to managing director, so I asked to speak to new boss. New boss is surprised to hear from me, and he's even more surprised when I tell him who called me Sunday morning. And here's the thing. Since the ex-sales rep never had my private number, let alone anything like my address, both new boss and I are pretty convinced that the sales rep must have gotten it from my HR file somehow. More than embarrassing for XYZ, this is the kind of confidentiality breach that can result in criminal charges, as well as being straight-up fraud, and a very clear violation of the terms that ex-sales rep got that business from them on. New boss promises to investigate and get back to me. A day later, I got a written apology from XYZ. New boss has personally investigated, including speaking to the ex-sales rep. And while they're not telling me what they found out or accepting liability, I can rest assured that this will absolutely never happen again. And it didn't. And the next time I saw some of my colleagues in the pub, their gossip was about this particular long-time employee who suddenly decided one Monday lunchtime that they needed to resign immediately and clear their desk the same day, losing all their severance in the process. And yes, that employee would have had access to the HR files. Now, I never bothered to dig deep and get all the gory details, but I understand that ex-sales rep wound up on the receiving end of some large bills for consequential loss from XYZ, like sell your house in a hurry and it's still not enough size bills. And that was the more palatable alternative to being sued for fraud. On top of that, the guy still had to close his business because that kind of news spreads really fast for some reason, and people stop trusting you to service their machines. Holy moly, guys, like I've always heard that some salesmen can be sleazy to line their pockets, but this is something else. Like honestly, how did that guy think he would never be caught? Like did he really think nothing would ever go wrong with the machine designed and people would never call the number provided for them, which they pay a fee for? Like the only thing that would have made this story better is if OP took legal action to reclaim those fees that the idiot charged for giving out his personal information. But yeah, I can't even begin to fathom the amount that ex-sales rep had to pay. Like sell your house and it's still not enough. I'm guessing the figure might be close to like $1 million or more. Who knows? I just hope he enjoyed that free money for a decade because that man is not recovering. Okay, so here's my issue. My husband's over-tightening of jar lids has been an issue ever since we were dating. First, it started with things he used, and then over time, it became every damn glass jar with a metal lid. My husband would tighten them so much that I couldn't open them without assistance. It wasn't a huge deal if he was there, but if I was alone, it was so annoying. More times than I can count, I've opened a new jar of something because I couldn't get the jar open. It's been a recurring cycle over the past 5 years. It's just a thing that would escalate until I had a major meltdown and freaked out, screaming, frustrated, and seemingly crazy because it's just a lid. It would get better for a while, and then it would slowly become an issue again, just getting worse and worse until I reach a breaking point. Sometimes I literally feel insane for being upset over jar lids. He initially claimed that he did it to keep the food fresh, and after many arguments about it and my insistence that I don't believe it keeps anything fresh, his excuse was that it's a habit. So about a month ago, my husband had a family emergency, and he had to travel out of state for 10 days. The first day he's gone, I discover a jar lid I can't open. I was annoyed, and I was going to the store to buy new pickles when the neighbor said hi and to let him know if I needed anything while my husband's out of town. So I said to him, "Wait here," and then got the jar which he opened. The next day, I see him outside, and I ask him again to open another jar. He then offered to come open all the jars. I agreed, and he came inside, went to the fridge, and opened all the jars except for 2, which he couldn't even get open. I thanked him profusely, and I told him that I would bake some of his favorite cookies later in the week. He then laughed and said it was no big deal. And after confirming that I wouldn't be upset if the remaining 2 jars were destroyed, he took them home to his garage to open them, one way or another. He said to me that he's heard me screaming over tightened jar lids a few times over the years, and he's really pondered if I was crazy or if my husband was really over-tightening the jar lids. This is when my neighbor said to me, "You know, I think this was intentional. It's every jar, and I'm sure he doesn't regularly use hot pepper paste or mango puree or any of your other fancy cooking stuff." He then held up the 2 jars he couldn't open, and he said, "I don't know why he's doing it, but it's not an accident." After he left, I locked the door, and I sat on my kitchen floor and I cried. Later, the neighbor came back with the open jar of fudge, and he apologized that he couldn't save the figs. He said he broke the jar trying to get it open. He also apologized for what he said about my husband doing it on purpose. I assured him it was okay. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned all night. I called out of work, and by 10 a.m., I realized I couldn't stay married anymore, and I made an appointment with a lawyer the next day. And there's literally no other issues. There's no cheating, no abuse, intimate life is good, we both have good jobs, nice house, no financial issues. He was absolutely blindsided when he came home and I told him I want a divorce. He still won't admit that he tightened the lids on purpose. He suggested that we go to marriage counseling, but I refused. I just literally can't get past the 5 years. I have no idea why he would tighten every jar lid so tightly that I couldn't open it. He's given me no reason, but the hot pepper paste is in the back of the fridge, and I only use it while making Indian food. It's behind all the other things, and he's never used it. And this is what my life comes down to. I'm getting a divorce because the lid to my hot pepper paste was over tight. Most of our friends and family either think I'm crazy or the a-hole, so what do you think? Honestly guys, like reading this post, I don't even know what I do. Like the only innocent explanation I could think of for this is like OCD or something. Like maybe the guy's actually convinced that jar lids need to be super tight or else the food goes bad. Who knows? Otherwise, it looks really bad for him. And a lot of people are saying that OP isn't crazy, like this is abuse. This person comments, "My ex would do this too. When I was pregnant, he wanted to control really random things. The abuse escalated to extreme violence, but stuff like this happened too." This person says, "You are not the a-hole. Your husband has spent 5 years deliberately making your life harder in tiny ways, and then lying to your face to make you think you're crazy." And this person's comment with over 10,000 upvotes says, "In all the 33 years with my husband, he did nothing but make my life better, easier. You know why? Because he loves me. Your man is trying to make your life harder, to make you seem crazy, unhinged. That's not love. It's not about the jars and lids. He's not nurturing you. He's trying to make you dependent in some way, however small a way it is. His ego has cost him you. I too would not be able to trust my man if he did this type of behavior. And without trust, there's no relationship. You are not the a-hole." But yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts. Like, it just boggles my mind that husband is not listening and he hasn't listened for 5 years. Like, to me, it's common sense. When someone tells you not to do something because it affects them negatively and they don't like it, don't effing do it. It's common sense, again. But I guess for some people, they don't give a damn what others ask of them. And that, my friends, is r/EntitledPeople. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's another r/EntitledPeople episode, where people are getting back at their crazy neighbors. Go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.